Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into something that just exploded across Europe, and I mean literally within a 24-hour window. The Italian government put a 25-year-old imam on a plane and kicked him out of the country. No court hearing, no appeal process, no dragging through the legal system for years. The trigger, a hidden camera video that caught his own words on tape. But what really set all of Italy on fire wasn't just the footage itself. It was that once the public saw it, this imam didn't apologize, didn't try to clarify, didn't say he was taken out of context. Instead, he stood his ground and insisted that his views were scientifically valid. And then, to make it even more dramatic, two mosques he was associated with almost simultaneously put out statements completely distancing themselves from him. The clip aired on Italian national television, and within hours, the entire country was asking the same question: does this guy still belong in Italy? And the government, they didn't hesitate for a second. They pulled the trigger immediately. For a whole lot of Italians, certain lines, once you cross them, you pay the price. No exceptions, no mercy, no second chances. Now, let's rewind and look at where this all went down. The city is Brescia in northern Italy. To most people outside Italy, Brescia is just another name on a map, nothing special. But inside the country, it carries a specific label. The mainstream Italian media has long referred to it as the Islamic capital of Italy. Now, that's not meant as an insult. It's purely about demographics. Over decades, huge numbers of immigrants from Pakistan, Egypt, and North Africa poured into Brescia, found work, settled down, started families, and built their own neighborhoods, schools, and religious centers. The local population got used to it a long time ago. Everyone goes to their own jobs. Kids go to their own schools. Different communities just share the same space. On the surface, it's a textbook example of multicultural coexistence. But underneath that calm exterior, there's always been an undercurrent of tension that the authorities have been monitoring for years. And that brings us to the other face of Brescia, the one that doesn't make it into the tourism brochures. For years, Italian intelligence services have had this city on their watch list because multiple times over the years, religious figures and venues suspected of spreading extremist ideology have surfaced there. And this isn't just street talk or rumors. It's all documented in annual counterterrorism reports that are made public. The Italian government doesn't just guess about these things. They track them systematically. So when investigative journalists from Italis Channel 4 decided to go undercover, they picked Brescia as their first stop. They knew that if they could get something usable there, the impact would be massive. And in April of 2026, what they captured turned out to be way more explosive than anyone expected. We're talking about a level of shock that reverberated from the streets of Brescia all the way to the halls of Parliament in Rome. Now, let's talk about the political backdrop, because that matters a lot. Since taking office in October of 2022, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government has been known for one thing above all: a hardline approach to immigration. She ran on that platform, she won on that platform, and she's been delivering on it ever since. Italy had already expelled several foreign religious figures for promoting hate speech in the past, and the legal framework for that was already pretty solid. What they really needed was a piece of evidence so undeniable, so crystal clear, that no judge, no opposition lawmaker, no media pundit, and no segment of public opinion could possibly challenge it. They needed something that would silence the critics before they even opened their mouths. And then, boom, they got exactly that. It was the perfect storm of timing, evidence, and political will. The reporter on this case is Francesco Leone. He works for a well-known Italian investigative program, and his specialty is going undercover with hidden cameras, going after stories that most journalists won't touch. This guy has balls, I'll give him that. His assignment this time around sounded simple enough: pretend to be an Italian who just converted to Islam, walk into a few mosques in Brescia, and ask questions as an ordinary believer seeking knowledge. No agenda, no loaded questions, just a new guy trying to learn. He picked two locations. One called Minhaj UL Quran Islamic Cultural Center, and the other Al Noor Cultural Association. Both are legitimate registered religious venues with regular congregations. And as luck would have it, the same young imam was leading prayers and giving lectures at both places. Alaika Shif, 25 years old, Pakistani by birth, and a resident of Italy for more than 6 years. To the local worshippers, he was just a young religious teacher leading prayers and answering questions, completely unaware that the guy asking all those innocent-looking questions had a hidden camera strapped to his chest the whole time. Think about that for a second. This guy had no idea his entire future was about to be recorded and broadcast to millions. The conversation between them unfolded over multiple sessions, sometimes in Italian, sometimes in Urdu. With a translator stepping in when needed, there was no yelling, no aggressive questioning, no verbal traps laid out. Just a new Muslim asking basic questions and the Imam giving his responses. And that's exactly why the footage, once it went public, carried so much weight because there was no editing magic. No deceptive cuts, no taking things out of context. It was just a religious instructor in his own familiar environment saying what he actually believed in. And that's what made it so damning. You couldn't blame the journalist for twisting his words. You couldn't blame the translator for misinterpreting. The words came straight from his own mouth in his own voice with his own confidence. The reporter's questions were pretty ordinary stuff about marriage rules, Islamic jurisprudence, and what the Quran says about when a girl reaches adulthood. These are standard topics in religious education. Kashif gave long, thorough, and very confident answers, but then came the final key question, the one that would upend his life just days later. The reporter asked, according to the Quran, at what age does a girl become an adult and become eligible for marriage? Kashif didn't pause, not for a second. Through his translator speaking in Urdu, he calmly replied, a girl is considered an adult when she has her first menstrual period, and at that point she can marry. And then he went even further, explaining that in his understanding, a 9-year-old girl could also be considered an adult. He didn't just say it once, he repeated it scientifically speaking. A 9-year-old is an adult. He said that twice. And in the video, he wasn't offering a personal opinion. He emphasized that this was the teaching he understood and preached. He was teaching this as doctrine, as truth, as something his followers should accept. And those few sentences, they detonated a national firestorm across Italy. The reporter kept going. If a girl's only 9, can she marry a man in his 30s or even 40s? Kashif gave the same direct answer. Yes, as long as the parents agree that marriage is legally valid. He also casually mentioned that he himself had gotten married at 16. Let that sink in. He was married at 16. And he's teaching that 9 is acceptable. A few weeks later, both mosques released statements clearly saying that Kashif's remarks did not represent them. But in that undercover footage, Kashif wasn't having an off-the-record chat. He was teaching religious doctrine in a formal setting. A 9-year-old girl, in his own spoken words, was scientifically fit to marry a man 30 years older than her. That's not a casual comment. That's a public declaration of a value system that most of the civilized world finds absolutely repugnant. That footage aired in early April of 2026 on an Italian national television program. The name is Fuori dal Coro Isle. Just say it the way it sounds. And within just hours of the broadcast, the entire country was engulfed in a controversy like never before. Millions of Italian viewers heard those statements with their own ears and heard him double down on them, insisting they were in line with science. The video was no longer just a news report, it became hard evidence right in front of everyone. So the debate in Italy quickly shifted, not whether the government should step in, but how quickly they would act. And let me tell you, when a nation moves that fast, it tells you something about where the red line is drawn. As soon as the episode ended, the response went viral. Clips spread like wildfire across X, Facebook, and every other social platform, trending everywhere, dominating news sites, forcing talk shows to scrap their scheduled segments and bring in experts, lawyers, and religious scholars for late-night emergency panels. And here's what's striking. There was zero political division on this. Left-wing, right-wing, conservatives, liberals, secular voices, religious voices, every single one condemned Kashif's remarks. Even Italian Muslim organizations were among the very first to come out against him. That's not just political unity. That's a societal consensus. When you have people who disagree on everything else suddenly agreeing on one thing, you know that thing is serious. A few days later, those two Brescia mosques issued simultaneous public statements with a very clear and firm position. The Quran does not require, nor does it endorse, underage marriage. Kashif's comments represented him alone, not the mosques and not the broader Muslim community. That statement was crucial because online there were attempts to paint this as all Muslims think this way. But within 48 hours, that narrative was completely shut down. The mosques themselves killed it, and that's important because it shows that the Muslim community in Italy didn't want to be associated with this guy either. They knew that his views were toxic, and they wanted nothing to do with him. But the political world moved even faster than the religious one. Right after the broadcast, politicians from every party started demanding immediate action. Government ministers made public statements, opposition leaders backed them, local officials in Brescia were under enormous pressure. In Italy, that kind of across-the-board unity is rare. Usually it means either the issue is too minor to fight over, or it has crossed a line that nobody dares to defend. This was clearly the second case. Nobody wanted to be the one who stood up and said, hey, maybe we should give this guy a break. That would have been political suicide. While the whole country was in an uproar, Brescia's police chief, Paolo Sartori, was also watching. And that same week, his office began reviewing the entire undercover footage. The core question in front of him wasn't actually that complex. Italian law, like the laws across Europe, has clear provisions protecting minors. Any public statement supporting a 9-year-old's marriage directly conflicts with existing law. The real challenge was, which legal tool could they use to get this individual out of the country? They didn't want to just fine him or give him a slap on the wrist. They wanted him gone. Sartori ended up reaching for one of Italy's toughest immigration laws, Article 4, Paragraph 3 of the Unified Immigration Act. Honestly, a lot of Italians don't even know this provision exists. It gives the government sweeping authority to expel any foreign national deemed a threat to public order or national security, even if that person has never been criminally convicted. The law classifies such individuals as socially dangerous persons, and once that label is attached, the process accelerates dramatically. No criminal trial required, no court judgment needed, no lengthy appeals process. The government acts through administrative order, and it can happen in days, even within hours. It's a nuclear option, and they didn't hesitate to use it. Past Italian governments were cautious with this authority. They worried about getting challenged by European human rights courts or being accused of bypassing the judiciary. But Meloni's government didn't hold back. After reviewing all the footage, Sartori's office referred the case to the Interior Ministry. They evaluated it and formally determined that Kashif met the criteria as a social danger under that law. Police also double-checked his immigration status, and here's the kicker, even though he had lived in Italy for more than 6 years, just before the video surfaced, his residency renewal application had already been denied. So by April of 2026, he was already in the country without valid legal status. That meant the video didn't just give them a reason to act, it eliminated any legal loopholes he might have used to fight back. The stars aligned perfectly for the government to make an example out of him. Once all the conditions were satisfied, the expulsion order was signed very quickly. Immediate removal, direct flight to Islamabad, Pakistan. On Friday, April 3, 2026, the order was executed. Police took Kashif into custody, held him administratively, then transported him from Brescia all the way to Milan Malpensa International Airport. A distance of about 90 kilometers. The whole operation was kept extremely low-key. They put him on a regular commercial flight to Islamabad. And by the time Italian media started reporting on it, the plane was already in the air. From the moment the program aired to the moment he left Italian soil, less than 24 hours done and done. No drama, no protests, no legal battles, just a one-way ticket out. Once the news broke, the Italian government publicly stood behind the move. Prime Minister Meloni made her position crystal clear. Any speech that undermines children's rights or challenges fundamental social values will not be tolerated. The Interior Ministry also pointed out that the administrative expulsion system is working as designed, and they noted that back in October 2024, an Imam in Bologna, who had publicly supported Hamas rhetoric, was already expelled. The Brescia case was simply further proof that the system can kick into gear rapidly when needed. And here's the really striking part: the opposition didn't raise any objections. In Italy, no political party is willing to stand up and defend someone who publicly argues that a 9-year-old can get married. That tells you everything you need to know about where the line is drawn. Now, to be fair, some human rights organizations did express concerns about bypassing regular judicial procedures and the broader questions of due process. That kind of criticism isn't unusual in Europe. But even so, nobody with any real influence came out in support of Kashif's actual views. 48 hours later, he was already back in Islamabad within a week. Italian media stopped mentioning his name within a month. The story had largely faded from daily news. But the impact he left behind hasn't disappeared. Every foreign religious figure living in Italy now understands that the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. You can't just say whatever you want and expect to stay. There's a new sheriff in town, and they're not messing around. And this is where things get really interesting. The part that a lot of mainstream media outlets didn't dig into. Kashif was deported back to Pakistan, his country of birth, where he had lived for 19 years. You might assume that since he claimed his views were based on religious tradition, that Pakistani law would be on the same page. But the reality is exactly the opposite. And this is the irony that so many people missed. In fact, just 11 months before his deportation, May of 2025, Pakistan's parliament passed a brand new law called the Islamabad Capital Territory Prohibition of Child Marriage Act. The bill was introduced by Member of Parliament Shamila Ferrucci, passed unanimously by the Senate, and signed into law by President Asif Ali Zardari on May 30th, 2025. The law sets the legal minimum marriage age at 18 for both males and females in the Islamabad area, not 9, not puberty, not parental consent, but a hard 18. And it goes further. It criminalizes anyone who facilitates underage marriage. Marriage registrars who process minors face up to 1 year in prison. Adult men who marry underage girls face 2 to 3 years. Anyone who organizes, arranges, or even forces a child marriage faces up to 7 years behind bars. That's serious legislation with real teeth. And this isn't even Pakistan's first effort in this area. Back in 2013, the province of Sindh already raised the minimum marriage age to 18. In 2022, Pakistan's federal Sharia court, the very institution tasked with determining whether laws comply with Islamic principles, specifically reviewed this question. Their final ruling, setting the minimum marriage age at 18, does not violate Islamic law. A court whose job is to uphold Islamic legal standards said that banning child marriage is perfectly compatible with Islam. That ruling was never challenged by mainstream religious scholars. Nobody appealed it, and it effectively stands as a key reference point in Pakistan's religious legal framework. So even the religious courts in Pakistan disagree with this guy. So Kashif's public preaching in Italy, his own home country, no longer endorses it. And Pakistan is far from alone Tunisia. Jordan, Egypt, Morocco, all majority Muslim nations set the legal minimum marriage age for women at 18. In 2025, Pakistan's National Commission on the Rights of the Child specifically cited these countries when defending the new law. Their Islamic legal scholars have reached a broad consensus. The minimum marriage age is a matter of public welfare, not religious doctrine. So when this guy claims that his views are rooted in tradition, he's cherry-picking from the most extreme fringe and pretending it's mainstream. And that's just not true. So when Kashif sat in that Brescia mosque and told that undercover reporter that a 9-year-old girl could marry, and that this was both scientific and grounded in Islamic tradition, he represented absolutely no mainstream position, not Islam as a whole, not Pakistan as a country, not the Quran, not Pakistan's own federal Sharia court. Even the 2 mosques he taught at publicly rejected him. In the end, he represented only himself, and a fringe opinion that his own country had already outlawed. He was a man out of step with his own culture, his own religion, and his own nation's laws. And that is the deeper layer that a lot of mainstream reports failed to highlight. Once you realize that Pakistan itself has banned child marriage, and its religious courts back that ban, then this whole story stops being a simple Islam versus the West narrative. The real picture is this: one individual with extreme views ran headfirst into the full weight of society, including his home country, his own religious legal scholars, and Italy's local Muslim community. This wasn't a clash of civilizations, it was a clash between one man and basically everyone else. And Brescia wasn't an isolated incident either. 18 months earlier, on October 8, 2024, Interior Minister Piantadosi signed another expulsion order also against a Pakistani imam, Zulfikar Khan, 54 years old, who had been living in Italy since 1995. But that case had different roots after the Israel-Hamas conflict broke out on October 7, 2023. His sermons became increasingly radical, anti-Semitic, anti-Western, anti-gay, and anti-women's rights. The government also determined that he was promoting extremist jihadist ideology and had ties to radical Islamist circles. Same outcome though: no criminal trial, no drawn-out litigation, just direct administrative deportation. So Italy has been building this playbook for a while now. So what you see here is that Meloni's government has developed a consistent playbook when it comes to foreign religious figures promoting extremist views. They don't treat it as a free speech issue. They handle it as a national security matter, Immigration Law Article 4. Paragraph 3 is their go-to tool, and the Brescia case expanded that standard even further. It used to be aimed mainly at pro-terror rhetoric. Now, openly advocating views that seriously violate European child protection laws can also trigger immediate deportation. They've basically said, we don't care what your religion says, if you cross this line, you're out. And this isn't just an Italian phenomenon. The United Kingdom is moving in the same direction. In January of 2026, the Northampton Crown Court delivered a landmark ruling. Imam Ashraf Osman, 52 years old, was convicted for officiating a religious marriage ceremony. Both participants were 16. It was only a traditional nikah without formal civil registration, but British law had already raised the minimum marriage age to 18 in 2023. Osman claimed he wasn't aware of the legal change. The court acknowledged that might be true, gave him a lighter sentence of 15 weeks suspended. This was the very first case under that new law. Of course, there's a difference 16 versus 9, but both countries are sending the same message. No matter what religious traditions might say, when it comes to protecting minors, the law of the land is what applies, period. That principle is being enforced in more and more European countries. Now, in the past, many religious figures assumed that religious matters enjoyed some special protected space. That era is ending. Italy is in the lead, the UK is following, and France, Germany, the Netherlands, and others are closely monitoring similar cases. There's a wave sweeping across Europe, and it's not stopping. What Italy really wanted to communicate through this whole episode goes far beyond one imam. It's responding to a fundamental challenge that all of Europe is grappling with when religious or cultural beliefs collide with laws designed to protect minors, whose rules ultimately win. Italy's answer came in the form of an expulsion order. Pakistan had already given its own answer 11 months earlier. Through its parliament, the two Brescia mosques gave their answer in the same week through public statements. The only person who consistently held a different view from beginning to end was Ali Kashif himself. And now he's back in Pakistan where the law says he's wrong too. So what's the takeaway here for me? As an American watching this from across the Atlantic, it's a reminder that when a society decides that certain values are non-negotiable, like protecting children from exploitation, they will find a way to enforce those values, even if it means bending or breaking the usual rules. Italy didn't wait for a lengthy court process. They didn't give this guy a platform to spread his views further. They just said, "You're done, get out," and you know what? The overwhelming majority of the country agreed. That's how you deal with this kind of problem swiftly, decisively, and without apology. All right? That's what I have for you today. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.